Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. This is a big, exciting video, but we're going to go kind of fast here because I have a lot of movies to briefly touch on. First, we'll start with a long list of movies I would say are good and worth a watch, followed by my favorite and least favorite movies, and some other notable mentions too. Remember, this includes any movie I watched in 2025, not just new stuff. I'll note where these movies are currently streaming if I can, so let's get started with a bunch of movies I would recommend. Strange Darling almost made my top movies list for 2025. I've become a big Kyle Gallner fan, and this movie proves again why I think he should definitely be getting more exposure and bigger roles. Willa Fitzgerald is excellent as well. Just a great thriller you'll be begging your friends to see too. Sea of Love is a crime thriller from 1989 starring Al Pacino, and I've taken a liking to these lesser-known thrillers from the 80s and 90s. They're solid, low-risk watch options that will sometimes surprise you. Case in point here with a movie boasting a pretty good plot that doesn't have any big flaws and keeps you invested. A Real Pain, written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg, does a good job of delivering exactly what you probably expect here. Eisenberg's character acts exactly like Eisenberg, same with Kieran Culkin's character. They act exactly how you would expect, for better or worse. But the script is decent, and these two characters feel very live and developed, so I enjoyed this one. All the Right Moves, starring Tom Cruise, is a great throwback. Set against the backdrop of a Pennsylvania steel town, Cruise's character dreams of really going places after high school if his football skills can propel him to higher places. It's tropey, but it does everything right. Tangerine, directed by Sean Baker, is an unflinching but often humorous and endearing look at two sex workers. The film was shot with 3 iPhones and not much else, and the director has gone on to win Best Picture since then. To me, those are great reasons to see this. It feels incredibly real, and it kind of is in a way. Another great movie that just barely misses my best of list. Saturday Night is a Netflix original that I thought was a success. It recreates the first airing of Saturday Night Live, specifically the lead up and preparation to that first night. It's a frenetic but fun insight into how crazy that night probably was for Lorne Michaels and many others. The interpretations by the actors are interesting as well, given that many of them are playing people and characters that we've become very familiar with over the years. Heretic, starring Hugh Grant, seemed like an attempt at going back to the grimy thrillers that the film industry sometimes forgets nowadays. If that's the case, I think they mostly nailed it. Grant allows 2 religious young women into his home and invites them to prove their faith. A gripping movie that never gets too edgy or graphic. I think all 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies are about equal, but the third installment has something the previous 2 don't. It is so much funnier than it has any right to be, especially for a family movie. Come for Sonic, Dr. Robotnik, and all the rest, but stay for the laughs. Just hilarious and wholesome fun. I read a comment online that said something like, "The Last Showgirl takes all its notes from The Wrestler, but in the best way possible." I tend to agree. This movie features an excellent dramatic turn from Pamela Anderson as a middle-aged Vegas showgirl who might be nearing the end of her career before she's ready. The struggles of hanging on to something when you're being forced to move on, as well as the questionable sacrifices made for a finite glimmer of stardom, are just some of the powerful themes in both movies. I feel like this might be the most overlooked movie of the last few years. I hope it doesn't stay that way because Pamela Anderson, Jamie Lee Curtis, and others pour their heart into this one, and it shouldn't be missed. For me, Past Lives is a movie that gets there in the end. I think this is a pretty inconsistent movie that didn't always do a great job of holding my attention. However, the ending is so powerful that the film ends up being more than the sum of its parts. It's a very real and heartfelt look into complicated relationships and how they change over long stretches of time. Everyone was excited for the new Naked Gun movie starring Liam Neeson, myself included. The trailer made sure that people knew this was a legitimate effort and not just a cash-in. The writing and jokes are good here. I'm not fawning over this movie like some other people. It's pretty weak compared to the other 3 movies, but it's still pretty funny, and it was important to feel like the 2025 version deserved its place among the rest of the series, which it does. John Wick 2 and 3 more or less add on to what was done in the first movie, and both deliver about as much as the original. The action is exciting if a little over the top, just like the story. I like the characters and the world here, though. I'm looking forward to tackling the 4th film soon, although it is kind of long. Bugonia features what I feel is Jesse Plemons' best work in a long time. He transforms completely here, and Emma Stone is pretty much good in everything. The plot surrounding two wackos who believe a business mogul is really an alien spy is engaging all the way through to the conclusion. I knew nothing about the Kingsman series, so I watched The Secret Service and then the sequel, The Golden Circle. I didn't realize how much fun these movies were. If you want to see James Bond thrills injected with some fantasy and much better action, then you need to watch these. The Substance is a crazy film. It speaks on body image, the physical expectations put on women, and the Hollywood cesspool that perpetuates all those things. It is very much not for the faint of heart, and late in the script, things get absolutely crazy, if a bit overdone. I can't deny this is a powerful movie that demands your attention, though, and deserves it. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley make for a great pair. The Surfer with Nick Cage is a quick mind-bender I've been begging people to check out. Our main character just wants to surf on the waves of his childhood beach, but the locals won't let him. Embroiled in this conflict, and also a fight to purchase a house on the beach for his family, the plot becomes a trippy portrait of obsession that doesn't overstay its welcome. I watched the black and white extended version of Nightmare Alley knowing nothing about it other than Guillermo del Toro was behind it, and the cast looked strangely impressive. I was not aware that this was a remake of the 1940 original, which was based on a book. Regardless, I enjoyed this from start to finish, and it's such a vintage, timeless tale. I think this movie does pretty much everything well, and the longer runtime was easy to digest here. The Stepfather fits into that forgotten thrillers category I talked about earlier in the video. I have a soft spot for Terry O'Quinn because he played Alex McSween in Young Guns. He's good here as a serial killer who murders his family, then moves on to do the same thing again. It turns out there are 2 sequels to this, and as long as I don't get my hopes up too much, I think I'll enjoy those as well. Weapons is another movie I could be convinced to put on my best of list for 2025. I was mostly neutral on Zach Cregger's Barbarian, but I think you can see real growth when you watch this movie. Cregger has this way of mixing horror with an interesting dash of humor that I like very much. Amy Madigan steals the show as a suspicious old lady, and this movie gets better and better as it goes along, in my opinion. Highly recommend it. One Battle After Another is one of those darlings of the year that is destined to win some significant awards. I think the first hour of this movie is absolutely incredible, and the rest is really good too. My only complaint is I think the movie failed every time it tried to inject some comic relief. None of the humor was funny to me. Everything else, though, amounts to a very good Paul Thomas Anderson film, and that's always worth a watch. The Amateur is another remake and one of the least original movies I've listed here. This is a solid revenge flick with a great set piece or two, though. A good popcorn movie that your dad would also enjoy. Lastly, in this category, Jay Kelly on Netflix follows an actor played by George Clooney. Jay is pretty much a fictional version of Clooney, and we see just how exactly a career like his that's so big affects him and the people around him. I found this to be severely hit and miss, but the good parts are exceptional in my opinion. Clooney, Emily Mortimer, and Adam Sandler are great in this, and a special shout out to Billy Crudup, who delivers maybe the best acting scene I've ever witnessed. No joke. If you're a moviegoer who enjoys insight into the Hollywood lifestyle on top of the normal viewing experience, you'll get a lot out of this. Okay, that's a long list of movies I would recommend, but here are the best of the best, and for various reasons, I did go more traditional here and included only movies from 2025 or close to it. In no particular order, here are my top 3 movies I watched in 2025. Nosferatu put together everything I liked about Robert Eggers' other films, and this one eclipses my previous favorite of his, The Northman. This is a remake complete with its own identity. This is not a ho-hum cash grab. This is Eggers rocketing towards his apex as a director, and possibly arriving there already. I would take minor issue with a few things, but in total, this is an awesome achievement by a director everyone should be paying attention to. The film is perfectly paced and dramatic but suspenseful. The characters are vivid and tragic. The acting hovers at a pretty high level as well. Whether you're a hashtag true cinephile or you just want a wild quality movie, Nosferatu succeeds in all facets. Okay, I feel like I'm one of about 6 people that saw this movie, but A Different Man is so good I've already seen it 3 times. Sebastian Stan plays a struggling actor who changes his appearance dramatically for the better, or so he thinks. Seriously though, this is an off-the-charts character study. It's also a great examination of identity, image, and where self-confidence comes from and how people go about obtaining it. I continue to be sad that nobody's seen this. It wipes the floor with most movies that come along in any given year. And in a time where many people are craving originality, there's no excuse not to catch this movie. Finally, I really didn't order these in a specific way, but if I had to, then Sinners would be my number one movie of 2025. You want to talk about a movie that accomplishes a lot? We've got you covered here. This is an enthralling movie that hooks you immediately. Everything feels like it has real weight, and the script weaves in and out of drama, humor, intensity, tragedy, special effects, social commentary, action, and a lot more. I don't think there's anything this film sets out to do that it doesn't approach with skillful tenacity. Nothing is perfect, but wow. This movie's exceptional and clear messaging successfully tackles religion, oppression, class, economics, and more. All of that aside, you can judge it simply as a celebration of music and its history, and the movie would still be received well on that basis alone. Congrats to Ryan Coogler and everyone who worked on this. It's a real achievement. Now we get to my most underwhelming movies in 2025. These aren't terrible, but I really had higher hopes. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning was on my radar ever since I watched Mission Impossible Fallout, which I thought brought the series back up to its highest standard. Unfortunately, this is just a no-go for me. People, we never need an action movie that's approaching 3 hours. Never. Also, the plot involving characters from the past who we are just now meeting is a bad move in my opinion. Complete with a forced comedy scene where super spy Ethan Hunt can't start a car, this is a flop and I loathe the idea of watching the conclusion. The Brutalist reminds me a lot of The Master by Paul Thomas Anderson. It's beautiful and it makes you feel like you've traveled to the time and place the movie is set in. Beyond that, the movie fails to be engaging for much of the runtime. Amazing to view from the lens of filmmaking, but I had a lot of issues with the story in particular. I'm pretty sure I won't make any new friends with this one, but Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk, was so disappointing. I like Odenkirk, and he's a pretty good choice here, but I'd just like to see the writers challenge themselves a little more. Just one or two little unexpected wrinkles would have made all the difference here. As it stands, it's just another version of the movie Taken, which is almost 20 years old now. I was extremely surprised when watching Anora. After Tangerine and The Florida Project, I was excited for more Sean Baker here, but where those movies excelled, I think this one simply fails. In those other movies, we see complicated characters who can come off as endearing or dangerous depending on what scenes you place them in. Here they just annoy you and make you check the time. I don't want to say too much else because I dispensed with this movie as soon as it was over, but all I can say is watch Sean Baker's other movies, which I feel are definitely superior. The Best Picture win here is massively confusing to me. Superhero movies have been on a short leash with me for a long time now, and Fantastic Four First Steps does nothing to get me back into that ecosystem. The story is so milquetoast and unchallenging. The characters aren't distinct. These could be any heroes. It genuinely wouldn't matter. The jokes are just generic filler to make sure the audience doesn't care too much about what's going on. It's a formula they've been using for about a decade now, and I'm just not a fan. Not to mention the oversaturation of this genre, but if you want another superhero movie put in front of you, this certainly is one of them. You just won't remember anything other than a few cool visuals. I think we need to start expecting a little more here. The Kid Detective is a great premise that I thought simply didn't have legs. I know Red Letter Media recommended this one, and it's made the rounds since, but I didn't get it. The plot is just such a snooze here, and the characters are dull, especially the Kid Detective himself, who I don't really buy as an abrasive, hungover PI with baggage. He just seems like a mildly irritated guy who could use a nap. This is a hard no for me, unfortunately. That's all the proper lists I have, but let's wrap up with some movies I thought were at least notable in one way or another. I checked out the 2017 version of The Mummy out of morbid curiosity, and I think it lived up to its reputation. Tom Cruise is fairly vanilla here, and the plot is generally goofy. I don't hate this movie, but for an expected blockbuster, it's pretty bad. In a vacuum, it's just a below-average movie that still does manage to pass the time, I suppose. Hard Ticket to Hawaii is often propped up over a lot of other silly low-budget movies from the 80s, and I can see why. The problem with these campy B-movies is that while you can definitely laugh at some parts, the rest of the movie is usually a waste of time. Thankfully, this one didn't loiter around too much, and it was a fun watch in exactly the ways you'd expect. Spider-Man Homecoming has informed me that I will not be watching the other movies in this series. We've already talked about the overuse of jokes in the MCU, but I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. It was difficult for me to even get through this. The jokes just never stop, and they're so underwhelming and lacking in any creativity. Imagine watching one of the older Spider-Man movies while your unfunny friend sits next to you reciting jokes out loud. That's what this movie is. No thanks. I had a run of a few old Jean-Claude Van Damme movies this year, and I think my favorite was Death Warrant. Van Damme infiltrates a prison as an undercover cop, martial arts ensue, and we meet some interesting characters along the way. I prefer this to Kickboxer or Double Impact, but it's well below Bloodsport or even Time Cop. Worth a watch, though. No Holds Barred was a spectacle when I was a kid, and Hulk Hogan was the biggest star in many parts of the world. This movie is basically Rocky if it were ridiculous, stupid, and about wrestling. It's so much fun, though. This was even better than Hard Ticket to Hawaii in terms of being hilarious and unserious, but rarely uninteresting. Finally, we wrap up with Superman 2025, which I was relieved I enjoyed. David Cornsweet makes for a pretty good Superman, especially in this interpretation, which I quite like. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor is a great choice, and the writing allows him to be menacing, but also sometimes over the top and unintentionally funny. This is a good mix of taking the source material seriously, but also remembering to have some fun while putting some contemporary spin on the characters and the world. I disliked the pacing as everything moves too fast in my opinion, but otherwise I hope to see more like this. And that's everything. Every movie I had big thoughts about in 2025. Well, mostly. I could have added a few more, but curation is key with these sorts of lists, I think. I hope you enjoyed this, and I want to hear what sounds interesting to you on this list, and what you've seen and how you feel about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.